Hey there, Heather Ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Down and welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 sports video. And today we're going to be looking at the top 10 NFL free agent busts of all time. I talked about the best free agent signings. Now, obviously, I got to talk the worst, the bright worst, if you will. Anyhow, so I got 10 free agents who thought they could be good with other teams, but failed to make the cut. All right. Number 10 is Javon Walker, 2008 Raiders. Javon Walker was a pretty decent wide receiver for the Green Bay organization with Brett Favre, and he was coming in his own. He had a knee injury, but he signed a 6-year, $55 million deal that's about 9.5 a year to Oakland. Unfortunately, his injuries didn't heal right, and he had off-field issues, and the Raiders kind of wished they had their money back, which was stupid. Number 9 is Anami Asamoga, Philadelphia 2011. Asamoga came from University of Stanford, if I remember correctly. Probably not. And he was a shutdown cornerback in the defensive backfield for the St. Louis Rams. Well, when the Rams were in St. Louis. But then Asamoga was given a massive deal by the Eagles, 5 years, $60 million, meaning $12 million a year. And he tried to fit the system, but he didn't, and all that. Rapid decline of performance, and basically he was not the same after that. Number 8 is Bruce Smith of the 2000 Redskins. So Washington had a habit, Dan Snyder in particular, had a habit of signing great players from the 1990s into the 2000s because he's like, we need to build Washington up to a contender. So they would make massive moves. So practically Washington was joked that they basically signed the 1992 All-Pro team in 2000. And one of them was Bruce Smith. Bruce Smith was this guy, number one draft pick in the 1985 draft, the year of my birth, from Buffalo, from Virginia Tech. Yeah, there was a Heisman winner named Bruce Smith, but that's not the same Bruce Smith. That's the guy from Minnesota in the 1940s. But anyway, Bruce Smith was this great guy for Buffalo on defense and helped them win 4 straight AFC titles. No Super Bowls, but still, he did it. But then Washington picked him up free agency for a few years. Basically, Bruce Smith was only added in for one reason, and one reason only, to get that sacks record held by uh, Reggie White, I think. Yeah, by Reggie White. So Bruce Smith was only there to get the sacks record. Number 7 is David Boston, 2003 with the Chargers. David Boston was a great wide receiver with the Cardinals organization in the late 90s, early 2000s. Cardinals were going nowhere fast. So they decided to get rid of him, and the Chargers saw money fly out. And David Boston looked like a good wide receiver for the Chargers and Drew Brees and later Philip Rivers. Unfortunately, though, David Boston was just who they said he was, kind of playing bad, and the system failed him. But yeah, David Boston's off the field stuff and whining didn't help matters either. Yeah, visions of that top 10 NFL worst free agents thing on NFL Top 10 come to mind. And one that did not come to mind was Andre Rison for Cleveland, signing a few year deal because, Cleveland was still in the throes of trying to get money for a new stadium or something like that. But then they moved to Baltimore. So Rison only spent 1 year in Cleveland before going to Jacksonville. Who else? That Dallas wide receiver, not Irvin, the Alvin Harper. He left for Tampa because he wanted to be a number one receiver and he failed. And yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. I know. Number 6 is DeMarco Murray, Philadelphia 2015. DeMarco Murray was a pretty good running back for the Dallas Cowboys and all that. They needed a good running back after Emmitt Smith left for Arizona / retired. That's also a bad free agency move that Arizona wanted Emmitt Smith badly. And, it wasn't right seeing Emmitt in blood red, as they call it. But yeah, DeMarco Murray led the league in rushing with Dallas, and then with the Eagles, he signed, and, it's treason. Dallas, like, why would you go to a division rival? Yeah, if you go to a team in a different division, fine. Anyway, he struggled with the Eagles. He put up 3.6 yards per carry, and they had traded him after one season of that deal. After one season. Could they have waited? Number 5 is Matt Flynn, of the 2012, excuse me, Seahawks. Matt Flynn was a not so great backup in Green Bay. However, in 2010, he had one stellar game coming into the final game of the year when it was meaningless, replacing Aaron Rodgers and throwing 6 touchdown passes in the final game. Seattle fell in love with him and decided to give him a 3-year, $20 million contract. I mean, Matt Flynn was supposed to be the starter, and Russell Wilson, who was drafted in 2012, was supposed to be the apprentice. Unfortunately, though, Flynn struggled. Russell Wilson outplayed him. Flynn rarely saw the field. He went back to Green Bay where he was a decent backup. But yeah, basically, one good game, and then you give him a fucking ton of cash, like $6 million a year. The good news for Seattle is it was a silver lining because Russell Wilson played his heart out, and then the next season, in the 2013 season, he helped the Seahawks beat the Broncos in the Super Bowl. He almost had back to back, but we all know what happened. So, and no, this will not be the last example of a one game player getting something. Number 4 is Rob Johnson of the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills in 97, or was it 98? I can't remember. But yeah, Rob Johnson was signed by Buffalo as a way to help them out. Yeah, it was 98. I remember that. So Rob Johnson was the backup to Mark Brunell in Jacksonville, got to play one game because of an injury to Brunell, and had a fantastic game, a game for the ages, as I said. So that was good in essence. But the fact of the matter is that DeMarco Murray aside, yeah, Rob Johnson was just a typical backup quarterback. And Buffalo decided to pay him the big bucks, 5 years, 25 mil, to come to Buffalo and be their starting quarterback. Jim Kelly had retired. Doug Flutie was signed from the Toronto Argonauts at the CFL, and infernally kind of getting me pissed off that Flutie would leave for the NFL and deciding to switch allegiances from the Argos to the Montreal Alouettes, because I thought the Montreal Alouettes were like me, overlooked it, undercooked. Why did I say that? But yeah, Rob Johnson did that. It was weird. Yeah, Johnson and Flutie. It's like, why did you sign Flutie in the first place if you were going to go after Rob Johnson? Johnson proved why he was just a backup and all that. Flutie outplayed him, beat Jacksonville in that big game in Buffalo. Flutie didn't play in the wild card round against Miami in the 98 season, which was stupid. And then the next at number 3 is the twin killings of both Desmond Howard and Larry Brown. It seemed that the Raiders watched one game the whole year, the Super Bowl, and looked for free agents from there. It all started with Larry Brown, who was a 12th round pick in Dallas, almost left football forever, but was persuaded to continue. And he was a key member of Dallas' defense in the 1990s. And in 96, he had that great game, 3 interceptions off of Neil O'Donnell. And basically, everyone, as Al Bundy once said to Larry Brown in Married with Children episode, is that, that bum O'Donnell just threw the ball straight to you. Well, you know that, I know that, most people know that, but the Raiders and Nike don't know that. Wants to keep a secret. So anyway, Larry Brown would become a Raider and would be a nobody in an essence. And then the next year, during Super Bowl 31, when Desmond Howard had that great kickoff return for a touchdown to seal the Patriots' fate and give the Packers their first title in 29 years, the Raiders remembered he was free agent, so they signed him and all that. The big contract did not pan out. He failed to replicate his previous success. The former Heisman Trophy winner did nothing. So it seemed that the Raiders were basically like Washington. They were just desperate for somebody. Number 2 is Brock Osweiler of the Houston Texans 2016. So Brock Osweiler was a decent quarterback for Denver, kind of in the era of after Jay Cutler / Randy Orton and Kyle Orton, and just before Peyton Manning. So Osweiler was part of the team when Peyton was around and kind of took over for Peyton as quarterback for a little bit. Unfortunately, he faltered, and after the 2016 season, even though that he had a Super Bowl ring, he left town. He did, even though that Peyton Manning had retired. Houston decided to splash him with a 4-year, $72 million contract. That's $18 million a year. And Brock Osweiler could have been Denver's starting quarterback, and failed miserably. He went to Houston. They needed somebody for their AFC South runs and all that. Unfortunately, though, 1 year later he was traded away, and Houston just wanted to wash their hands with that contract. And finally, number one is Albert Haynesworth. Who else? 2009 of Washington. Albert Haynesworth was this guy from the University of Tennessee who played for the Tennessee Titans, and he was pretty good. He was a sacks leader. He could pick the ball off. He could play linebacker and all that. So Washington knew they had to have him. They signed him to a $100 million contract, not for 1 year, but like $100 million overall. So Haynesworth knew what he had to do. And unfortunately for Haynesworth, his lack of discipline kind of ruined him and all that. His weight was an issue, he wouldn't practice and all that. He had to try to do drills for medical clearance and all that, and he couldn't. So Haynesworth pretty much sat on the bench. So anyhow, Washington got bit by this deal, and Albert Haynesworth ended up in New England, and he failed, rightfully so. But the fact of the matter is that Albert Haynesworth made things a little awkward, and you can't do that. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond, a Duke.